In 1954, a house in the United States cost $22,000. $22,000! The average income was $4,000 per year. And to buy a brand new Ford car, it costs $1,500 to $2,400. So about $2,000. Get a brand new car for $2,000. Now, the 1950s, this is when the car was king. Everything circled around the car. Pueblo was known as Steel City, and this is when taxes were high as fuck all across the nation, and everything else was dirt fucking cheap. Milk was 92 cents a gallon. Gas was 21 cents a gallon. Bread was 17 cents a loaf, and postage stamps were 3 cents a piece. Elvis, in 1954, hadn't been shaking his pelvis on TV just yet. January 28th, 1956 was his appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, but he had actually been on the stage show beforehand a couple times. So around 55, 56, but not 54. So 1954, the world hadn't seen Elvis shaking his hips on TV. His sexuality wasn't oozing out of his hips. Marilyn Monroe married the love of her life, Joe DiMaggio, in 1954. They're a perfect couple. Of course, nothing bad is going to happen to them. They'll get a divorce, so I don't know if I should mention that, but just to give you this is the time period of Marilyn Monroe and Elvis. Dwight D. Eisenhower is the president. The average top income tax rate is 63%. Americans are being taxed on their income by 63% in 1954. We just conquered the entire world after World War II, and then we were getting taxed up the wazoo. And everything was dirt cheap, and then all that money they invested into infrastructure. Ike Eisenhower is going to be known for the interstate system, the Eisenhower interstate system. So he was investing in roads. He thought it was a military thing, but you know what? I like I-25. 1954, Pueblo built I-25. They called it the Pueblo Freeway. So 1954 Pueblo has done a lot for the city of Pueblo. 1954 Pueblo actually was a major turning point. The tax rate, the top federal tax rate in 1954 was 91%. So 63% was the average, but 91% was the top. The average top capital gains tax rate was 25%. I'm not for sure what capital gains tax rate is now, but it was 25% then. And then the corporate tax was 52%. I think the corporate tax is like in the low 30s now. So, and I think that Donald wants to take it down to like 11. But in 1954, the corporate tax rate was 52%. Capital gains tax was 25%. And then the top income tax rate was 63% on average. So I'm not for sure what the bias and what the hatred is for 1954. I don't know why the elites of Pueblo are shitting on 1954. They want this amendment, the Strong Mayor Amendment, to basically collapse our system since it's illegal. Our 1954 city charter says that we're a city manager form of government. And they are trying to slip in an amendment to change our form of government, but not through a charter convention like it's been written. Like they're not being constitutional. They're not following the fucking law. So it's almost like they don't even know what the hell they're doing. They don't even know what the hell they're doing. I mean, constitutional law, that's where all the laws come from, right? And since we are a home rule city, all of our laws come from the city charter. And the third sentence of the city charter says, the city of Pueblo shall forever be known as a council manager form of government, meaning you elect the city council people, the seven city council people, and then they hire this city manager. And then that's the city manager form of government. The city manager is then the mayor, quote unquote, the person who runs the government. They're the head of government. So, 1950s, people are shitting on 1954 Pueblo. We have to be able to admit that 1954 Pueblo was better than 1854 Pueblo. In 1854 Pueblo, that was the Fort Pueblo Massacre. That's when everybody in Pueblo was massacred. Everybody was murdered and killed. There was like 1 or 2 survivors who had went by the river and was hiding by the brush. Some of the other ones who had ran away. Some of the boys were captured and then eventually they were returned in the long run. So that's like the handful of survivors. So 1854 Pueblo, we were being massacred and everybody was murdered and killed and everybody was dead. So people were still alive in 1954. There's towns and cars and buildings and shit. So, can you at least give me that? 1854, can we at least agree that 1954 Pueblo is better than 1854 Pueblo? Shit. So, 1950s Pueblo, Colorado saw lots of new schools being built. 1951, Morton Elementary was built. This is the longtime home of Pueblo educator administrator Max D. Morton. So Morton Elementary was built in 1951. Washington Elementary was built in 1951. Thomas Jefferson Elementary was built in 1952. And South Park, I think it's elementary, South Park Elementary School. There's a South Park here in Pueblo, Colorado, 1952. So they're building, 4 schools right there in the beginning of the 50s. And 1954 is actually going to be a lot of schools. We built 4 schools here in Pueblo in 1954. So you want to shit on 1954, then you better get on top of Benjamin Franklin Elementary School and take a big old shit on that school because 1954 built that school. You want to shit on an entire year? You want to shit on our ancestors, act like history doesn't mean nothing? History is the measure of where we've came from. How far have we came? So if you don't know where you came from, then how are you going to know where you're going? If you don't have a good solid foundation, how can you build anything? You're building on sand. There's a crack in your foundation and you're building on sand. So 1953, Pueblo is known as the heroes, the home of heroes. They decided that in the 90s, but the motto for Pueblo, the home of heroes, is because Pueblo was the hometown of 4 Medal of Honor recipients. William J. Crawford, Carl L. Sitter, Raymond G. Murphy, and Drew D. Dix. And apparently having 4 Medal of Honor recipients is more than any other municipality in the U.S. So at least that was said by somebody before. The 4... is that true? We're the only ones that have 4 Medal of Honor recipients? There's lots of cities out there, and we're the only one. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they don't do Medal of Honor. They were all in different wars, too. One was for the Korean War, one was for the Vietnam, and, I don't know, World War II, and they're all different. So, the reason why Pueblo is known as the home of heroes, that's our motto right now, which, it's okay, but it's for what happened in 1953. President Dwight D. Eisenhower gave Puebloan Raymond G. Jerry Murphy his Medal of Honor in 1953, and he commented, "So what is it? Something in the water out there in Pueblo? All you guys turn out to be heroes." What's in the water in there in Pueblo? Well, selenium. Actually, we got some selenium in our water, and I don't know. I haven't actually seen any tests recently. I heard in southern Colorado they got really bad water. I also heard there's a shit ton of radon. If you got a crack in your foundation, then radon just mercuries you. So Dwight D. Eisenhower gives out the 4th Medal of Honor recipient. He's like, "What the hell? Something out in the water in Pueblo? All you guys turn out to be heroes." Home of heroes. There it is. So because 4 of our 1950s men were heroes, that's why we're known as the home of heroes. The way that Dwight D. Eisenhower brought the end to the Korean War, which seems pertinent right now, was by threatening to nuke China. So Ike, Dwight D. Eisenhower, old Ike, he goes, hey, China, let's stop this fucking nonsense or I'm going to nuke the shit out of you. I already dropped the bomb on fucking Japan. He didn't do it. That was Truman. But he was threatening to do it again. I don't think any other country had the bomb at the time. So he's basically just threatening to nuke the shit out of China when nobody else in the entire world has that technology. So, fuck, they kind of had to listen to it at the time. China has the bomb now, so does Russia, so does 8 nations, or 9. Israel, and France, and the UK. How did that island get nuclear bombs? I mean, Israel's tiny too. We have actually less nuclear weapons. Russia has 7,000 and we got 6,800. So apparently we can only blow up the world, 6,800 times versus their 7,000 times. So the way Eisenhower actually brought an end to the Korean War was by threatening to nuke China. And that was 1 year before 1954. So this is after the end of the Korean War. The Korean War had ended. Ike threatened to use nuclear weapons on China until China agreed to the terms regarding the prisoners of war in the Korean War. So they wanted to do some sort of prisoner exchange. And China, being, I guess, one of the main negotiators for the Korean War, eventually agreed to it. Now, in order to make good on the threat, we planned on nuking the shit out of China. The National Security Council, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Strategic Air Command, they all devised detailed plans for nuclear war against China. So, July 27th, 1953, this threat of nuclear war eventually forces an armistice to take effect with Korea, and it divided North Korea from South Korea. And it was the same boundary that was in 1950, so nothing changed, right? Status quo antebellum, just like the War of Northern, or the War of Southern Aggression, the War of 1812. So there was an armistice, a ceasefire. The boundary remains in effect today between the North and South Koreas. The American soldiers are, today, American soldiers are stationed there to guarantee the Korean demilitarized zone to stay safe, to keep North and South Korea separated, and then also allow the return of prisoners. So the armistice, the agreement, ended the stalemated conflict. Nobody was winning this war, and when the armistice was signed, it created a ceasefire. So the war, the conflict ended. They stopped shooting at each other, but traditionally, to end the war, there was a peace treaty. Either the opposing side was unconditional surrender, like Robert E. Lee, that fucking bitch. He unconditionally surrendered. He's like, this cause isn't worth my life. I'm not about to die for the Confederacy. Robert E. Lee was like, nah, I quit. So Robert E. Lee was, he quit. What a quitter. What are we talking about? So even though no peace treaty, since no peace treaty had been signed, technically North and South Korea are technically still at war. We're still at war with North Korea still. There is no peace treaty. Traditionally, there's a peace treaty. The two sides get together and they said, okay, peace in our day. Right? Like Hitler and Neville Chamberlain. So 1953, Eisenhower didn't offer clemency for the Rosenbergs, who were executed in June 1953 for sharing nuclear secrets with the Russians. We were the only nation in the world that had nuclear weapons. And actually, the Rosenbergs had thought that they were doing it. I think they probably did do it. They passed on information about how to construct a nuclear bomb to the Russians, but it was in the name of world peace. Since the United States were the only country that had the atomic weapon, then we could just bully fucking countries. And what was the war for? Fucking communism? Is that why we were killing Koreans over fucking communism? Just like in Vietnam? There was a Red Scare. McCarthyism was at its height in 1954. Polio, they were trying to eradicate polio in 1954. They started it in February in the New England states, but by March, it was in Pueblo. Pueblo were getting polio shots. So 1954, that generation cured polio, stopped the Korean War, killed the Rosenbergs. So it's not all good stuff. And then 1954 was the Guatemalan coup d'etat. So they're threatening nuclear war. They're coup d'etat in Guatemala. That's 1954. 1954 was a different year, though, than 1953. The war was over. That was in the past. The Rosenbergs were dead, but that was in the past. That was in the past. That was before Pueblo got their city charter. Well, actually, November 3rd was when they voted for the charter convention. So this is important. The timeline is important. And I want to get to all the accomplishments. Oh my God. So, November 3rd, 1953, at the end of 1953, the people of Pueblo voted yes. Go ahead, write up a brand new city charter. They had a charter from 1911. They were running under the mayor system. They had a mayoral system with a board of aldermen. So there's already been a strong mayor system here. And that was when the city was being run by crime bosses and the spoil system. It was corrupt. They were giving their jobs to their family and friends. Nepotism abounded everywhere. But before 1953 ended, the people of Pueblo did vote for a charter convention, and that happened in November 3rd, 1953. So I don't know why people want to hate on 1954. Like I said, the Christmas Day Fort Pueblo massacre where the Muashis and the Yicarillas killed all the inhabitants of Fort Pueblo in 1854. That was a pretty bad year, right, Pueblo? 1954 is better than that, okay? So, if we can go from that ratio every 100 years, from everybody being massacred to, most people not being massacred, then what's the next step after 100 years? We're in fucking technology city with Jetsons and flying in cars and, have our robot fucking slaves doing everything that we command them to do. So, 1954, World War II had just been over. We took over the world. It had been over for 9 years. America ruled 50% of the world. Europe was devastated. Ike, I like Ike. Dwight D. Eisenhower was in his second year of his presidency at the time. The interstate highway system, one of the great wonders of the world for those who appreciate infrastructure, was built. The Pueblo Freeway was built by 1954 Puebloans. There are tangible, real-life things. They didn't just get us a city charter, but they built real-life things. You like I-25? I-25 is here because of 1954 Pueblo. So you want to shit on the ancestors of yesteryear when you like driving on I-25? And there's a lot of shit. There's a lot of shit that Pueblo did in 1954. So, April 1st, another President Eisenhower thing, he authorized the founding of the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. So, Eisenhower's doing a lot of shit. Our airport, we're going to get our airport up and running, and that was a military base. And then the depot, but they actually fired a bunch of people in the depot. But that's being a military, the Eisenhower interstate system, because of being a military-minded general. Dwight D. Eisenhower founded the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. A loss for Pueblo, success for Colorado. But that's a 1954 thing that happened. Okay. So what did Pueblo accomplish in 1954? Under George L. Williams in 1954, they got parks and recreation. They finally got it unified. Why? Because they had a city charter. The city charter allowed for taxation, citywide taxation. So once they got citywide taxation, then they were able to raise a bunch of money for all these infrastructure projects. And they did build a bunch of parks. So you want to shit on 1954? Take a shit on Bessemer Park. Right? All these parks, every single park was built from the Parks and Recreation Department because it got serious and unified under George L. Williams, the first Parks and Recreation Department director of Pueblo in 1954. And they also built the golf course by the airport. The Parks and Recreation did. So 1954 built the golf course by the airport. 1954 built Parks and Recreation and probably a bunch of parks too. The specific ones I don't know. And the airport. The airport itself became operational under the 1954 Puebloans leadership. The 1954 Puebloans got the airport up and running. 4 schools were built, 3 which still exist today. The Benjamin Franklin Elementary School, the one on Horseshoe Drive, where 500 kids are being taught today. District 60, what's up? Freed Middle School, that was built, 1954, named after a Pueblo family of educators. It's downtown. So the Freed Middle School, the Benjamin Franklin Elementary School. Irving Place was built in 1954 near La Vista Jail in downtown on West 21st. And they replaced the original school that was constructed there in 1906. And then Fulton Heights Elementary was built too, but it was shut down later. So the Irving Place, an elementary school, and Benjamin Franklin Elementary School, and Freed Middle School. So 2 elementary schools and a middle school still exist in Pueblo today because of the accomplishments of the Puebloan people in 1954. They built the freeway. It was being constructed from 1941 to 1959. That's what connected Pueblo to Denver, the capital of Colorado. And then Colorado Springs, comes in there and cuts us in half. But you like schools? You like airports? You like interstates? So the airport golf course, the airport itself, Interstate I-25, 2 elementary schools, a middle school. They constructed a brand new hot pool, a hot tub pool installed at the Minnequa Country Club. So the rich people, the elites, the civil society, they were getting their shit together too. 1954, Pueblo started the Parks and Recreation Department, unifying all the parks in the city. By 1980, Pueblo had 948 acres of parkland in Pueblo's city limits. Nearly 1,000 acres of parks in 1980. That wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the 1954 city charter and subsequent Parks and Recreation Department headed by, of course, as every true blue Puebloan knows, the first Parks and Rec director, George L. Williams. George L. Williams. So that's a lot of shit. That's a lot of stuff. 1,000 acres of parkland, a new hot tub, airport golf course, I-25, the fucking airport itself, the fucking airport. We got daily jet service now. We got daily jet service today, just like we had in the 90s. So Pueblo's airport is up and running again. We're making a comeback. We're coming back, Pueblo. Just like 1954 was coming back. So, Pueblo, you got to pay tribute to your ancestors, to your heritage and your history. You better pay tribute, America, to your liberals of your past. Because anything that's ever been worth a goddamn thing here was established by left, liberal, progressives. 1954 was a revolutionary and progressive document. You want to get rid of that document? You want to try to blow it up with this strong mayor amendment? Then you better convince me that it'll be more revolutionary and progressive. Because it sounds to me like you're trying to construct a Pueblo Illuminati. You're trying to have a secret cabal that runs the government by its own dictates without any adherence to the rule of law. And without the rule of law, what the fuck do we have here? At the very least, that's the set of rules you're supposed to follow, but they're not even setting their own fucking rules. For 63 years, we've been a city manager system, and now there are members of city council. I think they've already put it on the fucking ballot. Probably fucking unanimous. I don't know. Aguilera's always been against it, but maybe he finally caved. But the fact that it got on there, it's at least a majority. So the majority of the 7 put this ballot amendment 2A on the ballot, the mayoral, strong mayor. So they want to change it from a city manager to a mayor fucking system. Change the entire government, which you're allowed to. That's fine. I don't mind the change. I just don't like the change being done in secret. the charter says you're supposed to have a charter convention. And that's what 1954, they voted for it in November 3rd, but then January 5th, 1954, they named 21 delegates to the city charter convention. So 1954 got us the city charter. So, I mean, if you like Bessemer Park, Pueblo, you better think 1954 Puebloans. Think that year, think that generation, think those people. There wasn't a city-fied unified parks and recreation department back then. So when you take a shit on 1954, when you say, let's get rid of this 1954 city charter like it isn't shit, it's like you don't know your heritage, you don't know your history, you don't know the foundation of constitutional law. You don't even know how we're supposed to interact with one another. In our democracy, we got 3 branches, right? Legislative, judicial, executive. Right? That's still the case here, or are we doing something different in Pueblo? Seems like we're doing something different in Pueblo, and if they're not being lawful with a strong mayor, has the government of Pueblo ever been lawful? Have they ever done what they were supposed to do as they're dictated? I mean, those are the rules. Those are the rules. We're about to have an election, and all the rules for this election comes out of the city charter. So we got to listen to the city charter for the election, but we're not going to listen to the city charter for the entire construction of our entire government. The heart and soul of the city charter of 1954 is being ripped out by the strong mayor amendment. So, no, I do not fucking trust it whatsoever. When you take a shit on 1954, you're not just taking a shit on that city charter, which maybe that's too heady for you. But you're taking a shit on our airport. You're taking a shit on I-25. You're taking a shit on elementary and middle schools and all of our parks. So when you shit on 1954, why don't you just go out there with your, little butt cheeks or big ass butt cheeks. Pull down your pants, spread those butt cheeks, and just take a shit on I-25. If you want to piss on 1954, you want to piss and shit on it, then just go out there and literally do it. Benjamin Franklin and Fulton Heights Elementary schools. Just go take a big old dump right on top of Freed Middle School and the airports. I mean, the golf course and the new hot tub at the Minnequa Club, which doesn't exist anymore. But that would be okay. I would be like, oh, okay, that's cool. No, that's cool. So there's a lot that 1954 accomplished for Pueblo. The city charter, I think, is actually enough. John Oliver Hall was Pueblo's city manager. After the city charter was written up in 1954, he was our city manager for 2 years. He had been our city manager for 4 years prior to that. He had a ton of experience. He was like city manager in 3 different cities in Oklahoma, and then he ends up in Savannah, Georgia. But he was the city manager that got the city charter written up, and then he served as the city manager for 2 more years after the new city charter was written up. And it was written to replace the 1911 city charter, which was a mayoral system. So we've already tried a mayoral system, Pueblo, and it failed. We had a mayor for 43 years, and Pueblo fucking sucked for 43 years. That's why Pueblo picked a city manager system in 1954. All the corruption, all the graft, the spoil system, the stalwarts, the decision, boss hog, boss tweed. So the decision to rewrite the charter happened November 3rd, 1953, when it was put on the ballot, which is what should happen now. You want a strong mayor system of government? Put the charter convention on the ballot. And then January 5th, 21 delegates were named to the city charter convention. The delegates wrote and unanimously adopted the Pueblo city charter. So they went ahead, wrote it up, and then they offered it back to the people April 6th. But before then, January 15th, the Pueblo Chieftain and the Star Journal began to use honor box newspaper racks around the city. You put a quarter in, and then you pull the newspaper out. That was 1954. They started doing that shit in 1954, and Star Journal was a daily that we used to have here. We only have the Chieftain now. So no competition. Whatever the Chieftain says goes. February 5th, the federal government lays off 800 workers at the Pueblo Depot activity. Employment levels off at 4,500. And then April 6th happens. And that's when we approved our city charter. We replaced our 1911 city charter. We reduced the number of city councils down to 7. The Charter Convention submitted the brand spanking new revolutionary and progressive 1954 city charter to the people of Pueblo at a special election held April 6, 1954, who then approved it by a vote of 8,632 to 7,093, 55 to 45% by 1,500 people. So 8,600 Puebloan people were smart enough, and the majority had voted for this charter, and now the entire rules to the game were changed. Now Pueblo could make their own decisions. We could decide for ourselves what kind of city we wanted to make, what kind of city we wanted to create. We threw off our Denver and Washington, D.C. chains. We became independent and a free city-state. We became fabulous and fierce. On April 6, 1954, the Independence Day of the Puebloan people. May 17th, the U.S. Supreme Court outlaws the South school segregation. So that was going on too, the beginning of the Civil Rights era. That was 1954. That was 1954. Brown versus the Board of Education. The beginning of maybe we could change all of this, right? The 50s are what brought the 60s. From the 50s, we got the 60s. So we could do well, make a lot of shit, be wealthy, but can we interact with each other? Can we create a cosmopolitan society? A cosmopolitan society that is egalitarian, where everybody's represented? Can we have like a democracy where we vote on the consent of the government and then we have individual rights? And so that was huge news because Pueblo in 1954 decided to become an autonomous home rule city-state. In 1955, January 17th, Pueblo was named an All-American City by the National Municipal League, which is the League of Cities. So the League of Cities looked at Pueblo and said, yes, Pueblo, you're all fucking Americans. So we weren't just heroes because of our soldiers. We were also heroes because of our politician, John Oliver Hall. I don't know what his involvement in the development of the city charter actually was, but since he was the city manager who oversaw the vote of the charter and the construction of it, he was city manager for 4 years prior and then 2 years after 1954. I think he deserves most of the credit. John Oliver Hall. He was Pueblo's first city manager under the 1954 city charter. And he's the reason why in 1955 we became an all-American city. So the 1954 charter ushered Pueblo into the modern era. It ushered us into the modern era in order to fix the taxation problems. The 1954 charter allowed for citywide taxation, filling up Pueblo's coffers. And then our city's leaders invested that money in infrastructure which we still use today. 2 elementary schools, a middle school, an interstate, an airport. So that's another reason why you shouldn't diss 1954. When we had a mayoral system, when we lived under the 1911 city charter system, for 43 years, Pueblo sucked ass. Pueblo fucking sucked under the mayor system. We've already tried the mayor system and it fucking sucked. 1954 was the year that Pueblo got her shit together. So, don't diss 1954. You dig?